One of the nation's top prospects, Ian Premer, is set to join us and discuss his finalists. All that and more coming up on Verbal Commitment.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here as always with my good friend Ryan Wallace. And we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. It's a special live show this week, and that we're joined by great men tight end Ian Premer, 24/7 Sports' #1 player in Kansas and a top 40 player in the country. Ian will be announcing his finalists, but he'll also be explaining why he picked each school, so you won't want to miss that. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. All those things help us with the algorithm, help us to grow the show, and put us in front of more people like you. Really quickly, Ryan, before we get into the Ian Premer stuff, can we get an alarm?
Oh, it's my favorite part of the show.
If you guys watch the show, you'll know that this alarm means that one of the local schools has landed a commitment. And in this case, it's Kansas State pulling in local product LaMarcus Barber of Mill Valley. We will break down that commitment and what it means later in the show. But without further ado, we know what you guys are here for. Let's start talking about Ian and kind of what fans need to know about him. Ryan, at 6'6", he's a talented 3-sport athlete. Baseball might be his worst sport, and he hit 476 in baseball a year ago. He actually has power conference offers to play both football and basketball at the next level.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with basketball, Kevin, because, I mean, that is where initially I think his athletic futures were centered around, is, going and being a Division I level basketball player. And I tell you what, we've got a couple highlights of Ian on the basketball court, and they speak for themselves, folks. Thunderous dunks. I could have just made an entire highlight tape of the dunks, but I wanted to show some other things in here as well. But, obviously you get him, jamming the rim down is always good to see out of a kid that's 6'6". But I mean, I think you see stuff like this where he's bringing the ball up the court and just showing his agility, the timing, the reflexes, the reaction, all of these things. You see the length there. All of these things have transcended to the football field where, over time, Kevin, he's gone from, again, kind of being thought of as and even in his own right, following dad's footsteps, right? Dad was a college basketball player, following dad's footsteps, to maybe realizing there's a lot of things that I could transition from the hardwood to football. And, we'll get to the football highlights here in a second, but Kevin, I think he's really grown. I think when you and I first were introduced to Ian, it was very much a basketball player that was playing football. And I think over the course of the last year, certainly where we are today, he is a Division I football talent that also is a very good basketball and baseball player.
You've seen him put in the work in the weight room. I mean, I think guys will see that when he comes on camera here in just a minute. He's broadened his shoulders, done a lot of work. You see it when he blocks, right? He's got a lot more force and explosion behind his actions. We actually had Ian on the show previously, and he talked about some of the basketball things that you mentioned, how they transition to the football field. You see the body control. You see the way that, it's almost like attacking the basket or going after a rebound off of the rim. He's somebody that has that athletic talent that translates, but Ryan, he's also somebody that in every sport that he plays, the hand-eye coordination, he's a supremely skilled athlete.
No doubt. And so again, when we get into the football highlights, I think early on in his career, he was a guy that predominantly was, out wide and doing a lot of this. It was a basketball player, get up, jump balls, contested catch, try and get it at its high point. And now we're starting to see him stretch the field, in his junior season and really start to develop a little bit more of his speed. You're starting to see him do different things in terms of his route tree. A couple clips where he's lining up, almost like as a running back or coming around, on reverses. Here it is. I mean, he's doing a little bit of everything, and he's doing it, Kevin, with more physicality as well. I think that's what catches my eye, is the amount of plays like this that he's turning something that maybe was 10, 15 yards into 25, 30, 40, 50. And yes, he's athletic, but a lot of it is just what he's, mentally, physically, the motor, everything is there where he wants it, more than the next guy. And that's starting to show up more and more on tape. When we get to the rankings as well, I wanted to throw that up, Nick, our producer, if we have that, the graphic that shows, there it is. It, again, just further amplifies who this kid is as an athlete, to be first team in football and basketball at 5A, which is the second highest classification in the state of Kansas. And oh, by the way, he's also, an all-state baseball selection too. But you're seeing from the recruiting industry as well, I think they're starting to see what we've been talking about here in this intro, which is a combination of the floor is rising, Kevin. We always talk about on the show, the floor has been elevated by Ian, but they're also ranking him on that enormous upside and the enormous potential. As much room as he's grown over the last year, you and I don't know if he's even close to his ceiling yet.
We'll have 4-star tight end Ian Premer on here in a minute to announce his finalists and talk about how his recruitment is going. But first, we wanted to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Home Field just released its Diamond Classic series, which includes baseball looks for both Kansas and Kansas State. Perfect for supporting your team as they head toward the postseason. Overall, Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri currently have more than 40 items to choose from. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
We're back with the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. And we're joined again by Great Ben's Ian Premer. Ian, welcome back to the show.
Yep. Thank you guys for having me.
I went back and checked, and last time you were here, it was about 8 months ago, and you collected some offers, but it was still pretty early on in your recruitment. You still hadn't played a game your junior year yet. How has life changed for you since then?
Yeah, it definitely changed a lot. It feels like 3 years ago I was back. I didn't even know it was 8 months. Definitely feels like a long time ago. But yeah, grown a lot physically, mentally as a football player. Just I'd say it changed a lot overall since then.
And here you are, and you have your 5 finalists. We'd like to go through these kind of one by one and give you a chance to talk about each school, and you have plans to officially visit each of these schools. So let's go chronologically by visit. So who's going to get your first official visit?
Yes, my first OV will be at Michigan from May 30th through June 1st.
What was it about Michigan that has Michigan sitting at this place in your recruitment?
Yeah, I think for me, got up to Michigan in the spring over our spring break, and that was one that I'd kind of wanted to get up to for a while. But being a 3-sport athlete, it's a little difficult sometimes to get to the further away schools. And then I was able to get up there and really enjoyed my visit up there. Obviously, you think of Michigan, how historically good they are when it comes to football, and even that with a tight end position, they've done very well over the years. And obviously, I have Colston Loveland going in the draft tomorrow, hopefully pretty early. So that's exciting to see. And also the education part, I'm interested in doing like a business finance major in Michigan as a top business school nationally and even in the world. So those are a few things that kind of drew me there. And then when you win a national championship just 2 years ago, that's something that is great for recruiting because everyone wants to go and win.
Ian, I was curious, just expanding on Michigan here real quick. You mentioned that unofficial. You mentioned their history recently with tight ends. And even though he's the head coach now, Coach Sharon Moore was pretty instrumental in that tight end room for many years, both in Michigan and in some of his previous stops. I wondered, though, too, did he mention the fact that he's a native Kansan? Has that gotten brought up in your recruitment with them? And did he bring up, again, even though he's the head coach, the experience that Michigan has at the tight end position?
Yeah, Kansas wise, you don't see a lot of coaches from Kansas. So yeah, we always like to talk about that. And when I'm like saying like we have a baseball game here, he's like the only guy who actually knows like where that actually is, which I think is kind of cool and funny. And sometimes you even forget. I'm like, yeah, he's from Kansas, he's from Derby, which I think is always cool. And then tight end wise, yeah, I agree. I think as many tight end guys as you can have on the whole staff, offense, defense, head coach. I think it really helps because he really gets the position. And even at practice, when we went to watch the spring practice, he was over there working with the tight ends, showing them a little technique, which I think is always good. As many guys as you can have who have knowledge over the subject, it always helps.
With you taking the unofficial visit already, what are you looking to get out of the official visit? Like, what are you hoping that Michigan shows you?
Yeah, I think for me on the unofficial, only got up there one time, and it was for just a day. So obviously got to see the facilities, meet with the coaches, and watch a practice. But I think when I go for the OB, just kind of get a deeper understanding of what they're about and get to see everything a little deeper when you're going for 2-3 days, and then just excited to spend more time around the players and the staff, especially because those are going to be the guys you're spending the majority of your time up there with.
Kevin, I think the next one's going to be one that you're going to want to tee off.
All right, Ian, let's get into your second visit here.
Yeah, so my second visit, June 6th through 8th, I'll be going to KU.
You've mentioned before that you had a good relationship with Jeff Grimes, and now Jeff
Mhm.
Grimes is off to Wisconsin. Matt Lubick, obviously recruiting you now. What's that relationship been like, and how have you guys continued to build on that?
Yeah, for me, pretty soon after Coach Lubick got hired, he called me. I think it was right after. It was really great for me to know that they felt like I was a priority for them. That he wanted to hop on a call with me real quick, and I think we talked for like 40 minutes. It went really good. Coach Lubick, he's a fun guy, and obviously his history speaks for itself. Been all over the place as a wide receiver coach and an OC at some places too. So I think it really jumps out at me how much he knows as a true receiver coach and the route running part of my game, how much he could develop that. And the funny thing about him that people don't know is he has like a million clips stored somewhere. Like I don't know how he has space for all of them, but when I went for the spring practice there, showed me like 50 clips. He's like, "You think you could do this in your offense?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like these are all great things, and he's like, "Yeah, we're going to keep implementing some more of this stuff in our offense." So I think it's always good to see him showing me like what he's done and how he's going to try and help bring that to the KU offense in the upcoming years.
Yeah,
Ian,
go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, when we think about Kansas, I go back to the first time that Kevin and I got to meet you in person, and it was at the Sharp Top Prospect Combine, and there you were kind of hanging out with Caden Snyder. And now Caden Snyder is with JJ Dunnigan, is with Hunter Higgins, is with Josh Galbraith. And I'm curious, you seem to be the missing piece. I think there was a photo floating around from you guys all at Allen Fieldhouse not that long ago. You're kind of their missing piece. Do you feel like you're getting it as much from the Kansas commitments as maybe any of the other schools that we'll learn about here in a minute, and their commitment classes?
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys are who I kind of went through the recruiting process with. I would say like I'd played against Hunter Higgins baseball since we were like 7 or 8. Caden Snyder actually played basketball with him AAU wise for a few years. Dunnigan, obviously, he was at the Sharp Performance Camp and went to multiple game days with him where he just happened to be there. So I think that's definitely a key thing for me to look at. Like those will be my potential teammates that I'm hanging out and spending a lot of time with. And yeah, they make sure that I know that for sure.
A guy talking about a lot of the local guys, a local guy who's not in the state of Kansas but still nearby is Jack Oots, and Jack, brought you up and how he feels like you guys can kind of complement each other. You talked about Coach Lubick, showing you clips of different things that they have tight ends doing in the offense. So how do you feel like maybe you and Jack Oots could complement each other in that offense?
Yeah, I love Jack. I've talked to him multiple times in person and then over text now as well. And we both agree the more 12 personnel, the better. So we're going to want each other to keep getting better and pushing each other. And he actually texted me, I think it was last week. He said, like, come on, you're going to make the room better, make more competition. So yeah, I've got a good relationship with him. And I think even like the stuff Coach Lubick was showing us video wise, a lot of it was out of 12, maybe even 13 personnel, where he likes to use those plays to get us open. So I think that'd be a really good duo.
2 visits down, Ian, and we're going in chronological order here, folks. So why don't you give the folks watching out there the number 3 visit?
Yeah, my third OB will be at Notre Dame from June 10th through 12th.
Now, Notre Dame, Ian, is like technically the newest offer of the 5, not to spoil the next 2. But, you know, they offered back in February. You went to an unofficial in South Bend around the same time or like the day after Michigan or the day before Michigan. So not that long ago. You know, what continues to catch your attention about Notre Dame, and what have they been able to do maybe in a shorter timeline as some of the others, but still been enough to make your top 5?
Yeah, football history wise, you think of Notre Dame, like all the great history they've had there. Obviously, the Rudy movie, everyone's seen that, and then again, like the success they've had at the tight end position has been super impressive over the years. Coach Denbrock has obviously developed some greats there, and then along with that, the top tier education, the alumni base. Like if you go to Notre Dame and get a degree. After football, life after football, you'll have a ton of people wanting to hire you because they just know what that degree entails. And then Coach Denbrock, who's the tight end coach, he's also the offensive coordinator. So I think that's a little unique to have the same guy, like the guy that's leading your position groups and helping you out there, is the guy calling the play. So I think that's definitely an advantage there. And then you look at their season last year, being the second place runner up. That's always great to see that they're competing now. Like they've got the group, and then they're pouring money into football. I think when we went up there, they said like a $400 million new facility. So it's just always good to see those schools truly dedicated to football and continuing to build that up.
So some of the schools that you're considering did have really big years last year. Not trying to give away anything on the other ones. How much were you watching college football this past season? And this is, you know, we're talking about Notre Dame here. So specifically with regard to Notre Dame, I mean, how much did you watch Notre Dame and kind of think like, hey, I could maybe kind of fit in there, or did you watch the run under Marcus Freeman this past season?
Yeah, we definitely watched the run. Everyone was kind of looking at Coach Freeman and excited to see all of that. So yeah, watched all of those. And even though I hadn't really been recruited hard by them yet or even offered, I was definitely, I'd say, still considering them as a potential target just because of all that Notre Dame really has to offer.
Hey, real quick, Ian, before we get to the 4th here, I am curious about your relationship with Marcus Freeman and, you know, again, kind of how far that's come in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I've talked with him on the phone 2 to 3 times, a few times, and those conversations have always went great. But I'd say when we met and got to talk face to face, it was like the first thing we did, like watch or we had like the team meeting, and he's getting them all fired up, which is always great to see. And then pretty soon after, I got to go and meet and talk with him. So I felt felt good to know that I was important. He wanted to talk to me early on, and we had a great 20-30 minute conversation in his office. So yeah, I'd say we already have a great relationship, even though we've only talked and known each other for a short amount of time.
All right, Ian, number 4. What's the visit after Notre Dame?
Yeah, so after Notre Dame, it'll be Iowa State from June 13th through 15th.
Iowa State seems like a school that just from the outside, it seems like you're high on the Cyclones. Is that mostly relationship based, or what has it been about Iowa State that's kind of made you excited about what's going on in Ames?
Yeah, so I went there 3 times. So I went to a camp in June and really enjoyed that. And then they ended up having an excellent year. I think 10, 11 wins, really, really great year. And like you said, relationship-wise, the coaching staff there is a really, really cool and amazing. The offensive staff is pretty young, so they're kind of flying around and easy, relatable, easy to talk to. And they're just a great offensive staff overall.
Kind of an interesting, odd stat that I found. I mean, it worked out this way for you. And maybe this is something, that you thought about. Maybe this is something that, I'm going to blow your mind with here for a second. But Taylor Mauser, that you mentioned him, the tight ends coach, the OC there, is the only one of the coaches in your top 5 from a tight end position coach who's actually been at their said program more than 2 seasons. Everybody else has been there. Either this is their first season coming up or last year was their first season. I mean, does that carry any weight for you at all? The fact that, he's been with Matt Campbell for, so many years now. And again, another guy that's calling plays.
Definitely, yeah. Started off with Coach Campbell at Toledo, and then got the opportunity to come to Iowa State, and then he just worked his way up. Started as the analyst, worked his way up to tight end coach, and then he was when the OC last year left, and he hired him, elevated him to be the OC, which was really great for me to see. Obviously, you talked about like the tight end OC combo, which was very unique and special. There's only a few places that have that. And then, just how close him and Coach Campbell are, and knowing that it'd be tough to see. Obviously, college football is crazy, but I think it'd be surprising to see Coach Mauser leave Coach Campbell.
I know you talked 8 months ago about how teams use the tight end was going to be a major factor that you looked at. With Iowa State, how do you see yourself fitting into that offense?
Yeah, they're in 12, 13 personnel a lot. I know when I went up for a spring practice just last week, it seemed they were like basing out of 12 and 13 personnel, which always great for me to see more tight ends in the game, more opportunities. And obviously have a great room right now headed by Ben Brahmer and then Gabe Burkle. So definitely a solid room already, and they want that to be a main and core part of the offense. And they kind of, I'd say, showed that last year with a lot of heavy tight end sets, and then did have some injuries in the room, but I know that they're really trying to throw the ball there and get them all involved.
Ian, from one Big 12 team that uses the tight end quite a bit to another, which will be your 5th and final. Give the folks your 5th and final official visit coming up in June.
Yeah, my last OV will be K-State from June 20th through June 22nd.
And when you think about the Wildcats, I'm curious, they just had a transition from Brian LePack as your tight ends coach and a guy that you were developing a relationship with, now over to Luke Wells, brother of Matt Wells. Again, K-State is a program that's been on you for a long, long, long time, but you're just getting to know Luke Wells. How has that relationship been going so far?
Yeah, that's been great. Talked on the phone a few times, and it was great to get up there and really meet him in person and kind of spent the whole day with him. So I really enjoyed that. He's a lot like his brother, and really love both of them. And it's kind of funny, like I'll call because Coach Luke Wells is living with Matt Wells right now. So like one of them will call me and they'll like mess with me, like someone different will be talking than who actually called me, and I can't tell the difference. Like they sound so similar. So I've had some fun with that, and then they're both great guys, and love getting to know Luke Wells. Obviously, really liked Coach LePack, and had built a great relationship with him, and then moved right on to Luke Wells, and I'm really happy that they made that hire.
Now, you said on our previous episode, you come from a K-State family, and you grew up going to, a K-State game every year, every other year, right around there. How much has that familiarity helped with the recruiting process, or have you tried to go into it kind of with an open mind and say, hey, I want to see this, with fresh eyes?
Yeah, it's definitely played in the familiarity a little bit, going to a game or two every year, and growing up a K-State fan does mean something, and you can kind of envision seeing yourself like playing out there when you grew up watching it is always something that I think is really cool to think about.
Ian, on the last show that you were with us back in the fall, it's a question that gets brought up all the time, but we might have some new guests, some new listeners this time around. So we got to ask it again anytime Kansas State U gets brought up, and that's Lincoln Cure. What are your thoughts on, again, kind of following in his footsteps, not only as a great tight end in the state of Kansas, but also potentially, following him at Kansas State, positive or negative there?
I'd say definitely positive. The more good players you have in the room, the more competition gets brought up, and as we know, competition just makes everyone better. And I have a great relationship with him. I've talked with him multiple times, multiple occasions, and then he knows, like, anytime I have a question, I'll just shoot it over to him, and he'll respond to me back real quick. So I'd say that was definitely a positive that he ended up staying with K-State.
Have to ask too. You're a multi-sport athlete. Kansas State gave you the offer to play basketball as well as football there. What level of attraction does that have to you? Is that a big deal? Is it not a big deal? Is it something that you wish more schools would do? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think initially it was pretty cool for me growing up. I figured I'd actually play basketball, like you guys kind of talked about earlier. So it was really cool for me initially, but then after I've thought about it some more, I think I'm leaning more towards just football, just because of the workload that it would really entail, like wanting to be the best tight end I can be. The schedule overlap would definitely be difficult there, and then just having to gain weight for football than running so much in basketball would be a little difficult. But yeah, definitely was pretty cool. But I think I'll probably just play football.
Couple just quick questions from me here, Ian. First off, we've got your five now: Michigan, KU, Notre Dame, Iowa State, and K-State. The first thing that I think some fans might want to know is, we're calling this your finalists, but again, just to clarify, the blinders are on, right? These are the only five that you're focusing on from here on out.
Yeah, those are the five.
How long did it take you to kind of get to these five? I mean, did you say, I know I want three, but I need, I'm still trying to fill two more spots. I know I like four, but I need one more spot. How long did it take to really get to these five?
Yeah, I don't think any of those were really fillers. Like, I didn't really set like an official visit amount or a top five. I wanted for myself, I was pretty open, but I'd say those five kind of made it clear to me that I kind of wanted them in my finalist, and wanted to go see them again. And honestly, there's great schools all over the country. Like, you're not going to really see a school that you're like, man, that school, like, I don't really want to go there. So it was a process of me just narrowing it down and really choosing my top five. Like, I chose all these schools for a reason. I wouldn't say any of them are fillers. I'm really interested in each of those five.
Well, one more thing, and again, I know fans will want to know this answer, is, do you plan on taking all five official visits, or is there a scenario that it could exist where you just fall in love on one of them and you lock it down from there?
Yeah, I think for me, I'll definitely take all five. Like I was just kind of talking about, I chose all those five for a reason, and I think it'd be unfair to kind of choose one school after a good official visit, because those official visits, like, they're all going to be good. Like, they're set up to be the perfect weekend. So I think it'd be unfair and not right to the upcoming schools or me to kind of decide after one or two of those.
Do you have like a timeline that you want to decide by? I mean, obviously you have your five officials that you want to take, but is there a date is it something you want to get done before your senior year? Is it something where it's just, hey, when I feel right about it, it'll happen? I mean, do you have any sort of timeline?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, we'll get it done before my senior season, maybe late June or July. But if I don't know for sure where I want to go, and if I'm not 100% sure, then I'm not going to rush into any decision, because I want to make sure I really make the right decision, and then don't have to waver or go back on that at all.
Another quick two-parter from me here, Ian. And again, your answer to the first might answer the second. Do you plan on being an early enrollee? And if not, do you still plan on playing some basketball and some track, this time next year?
No, I will not early enroll. I want to play basketball. My senior year is the main reason for that.
Okay. And we have to ask you, you're the number one player in the state, according to 24/7 Sports today. 24/7 Sports came out with their rankings for 2027, and your teammate, Cooper Omot, is number one in the state. First, I guess, what's that feeling like that, hey, the number one player in the state in back-to-back years is from Great Bend? And then two, can you give us a scouting report on Cooper? Kind of what your thoughts are there?
Yeah, I think I was really excited when I saw that and kind of putting Great Bend on the map and realizing that yeah we can play good football. And I think was also cool. Gus Corsair from Hayes was the second one on that list. Both WAC teams, WAC players. So I think that's cool to see, and more people need to realize that the Western Athletic Conference it's a great football conference year in and year out. So I hope that'll kind of put us on the map a little more and get us more recognition. And then Cooper, he's great. He's the hardest worker you'll ever meet. Like he's day in, day out, lifting, grinding, and just overall excellent athlete. I'm a little jealous. He benches more than me, which is crazy. I think a few weeks ago he just benches 295 and he acts like nothing happened. And he's a overall freak. Like obviously, I don't know if you guys know this. He won triple jump last year as a freshman in 5A, like the second biggest classification. He goes out and wins triple jump, and he didn't do track before that. Like that was his first year doing track, and he just goes and wins it. Now obviously it's put in a lot of hard work, but that just kind of shows you he's a real freak athlete.
Ian, before we get you out of here, I gotta ask a question here, and I kind of feel bad doing it because I'm worried we're going to end it on a sour note, and I'm going to piss you off a little bit. But Coach Bernie, the Great Bend fans will love me for asking this question because I think it's going to fire up Great Bend, Kansas a little bit. I got to ask you, football last year, number 1 seed, 9-0, 19-14 loss at home to Hayes, a team you beat by 21 points earlier in the year. Basketball, number 1 seed at Sub-State, 18-2 overall. You lose by 2 at home to Eisenhower. The revenge factor, how much is that burning and how hot is that heat going into your senior year right now?
Oh yeah, it's hot. It's hot for all of us. We know we had a great regular season in both of those, and then just ended up short, close losses. Just didn't come out and play how we wanted to. So I think that's kind of driving all of us. Like we're learning from the loss. We know we have to be better and prepare in absolutely every possible way we can to not allow those things to happen. And in the little things, like we have to do every possible thing right to make sure that something like that doesn't ever happen again.
Yeah, you don't want to be on Great Bend's schedule next year, Kevin.
Yeah, sure. I would agree.
Sure. Well, last question I have, and then we'll get you out of here, Ian. We talked earlier in the show about the level of growth that you've shown over the last few years. What's the next step for you? Where are you working, and where are you trying to get better on the gridiron at this point?
Yeah, I'm really working on becoming a better route runner and then a better blocker as well. I think some of my routes, I get out of them a little too early and kind of look for the ball, but I want to do a better job of really having great route efficiency, getting through the route and knowing the ball is gonna be there. We have a great quarterback, Daxton Min, and he's gonna put it in the right spot. I just gotta be patient and get all the way through my route and kind of take some of the stuff I learned from camps and from these visits and continue to reuse it in my game and kind of improve that way. And then on the blocking side, kind of again, every time you or I go on a visit, I learn more. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it, and know I'm going to go and I'm going to dominate at the line of scrimmage, and that's something I'm looking forward to show. Last year, played a little more tight end in the H-back than I had my sophomore year, but that's something I always need to continue and grow on, is really that blocking aspect of my game.
Well, thanks again, Ian, for taking the time to share this part of your recruitment with us, and best of luck with your decision. Obviously, we'd love to have you back again in the future. For the rest of you guys, stick around because there's plenty more to talk about after this.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Are you ready to win some real cash during the basketball playoffs? Well, check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 posterizes the competition, and yeah, that includes prize picks. Hit all of your picks and score higher minimum payouts on Pick 6, plus even more cash if you outscore the competition. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. New players get 50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Here's what you gotta do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offers. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
It's tough to follow the legendary Tucker D. Franklin.
No doubt.
But for those of you who stuck around, thank you and welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. If you like what you've seen so far, smash that like button, subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Ryan, a lot to go through after Ian's announcement. Was there anything in particular that just kind of jumped out to you?
Well, I think, right away when you start to think about, the order of these visits, right? And, looking at the calendar per se, and there's a graphic of it, you wonder if things fell the right way for Kansas State. To hear Ian say, yes, I'm going to go through all 5 of these visits because it would be unfair if I didn't. And knowing that Kansas State kind of has that last word, right? I mean, we've seen it time and time again in recruiting, not just at K-State, but just in general. It feels like I don't know really who's in a front runner. I think a lot of these schools have been running kind of neck and neck, or maybe have been unclear where they stand with Ian. But knowing that Kansas State, the in-state school, the team, as you talked about, that he kind of grew up maybe a little bit more fondly of than others, has the last word. It does feel like, I don't want to say it's theirs to lose, Kevin, but I mean, I think they have a lot of things playing maybe in their favor right now.
There were some comments in the chat as this was going on, and Ian obviously came off very polished and very well spoken. He's a great kid. For those of you that are in the chat that have had a chance to know him, somebody is going to be getting a really good player, but also a good person, the type of person you want in your locker room. I agree with everything you said, and that I do think K-State's placement is pretty ideal there, being at the end of it, especially with Ian's commitment to take all 5 visits. That's the risk, right? Is if you're the last visit and somebody decides, hey, I've taken 2 visits, I know who I want to pick, that's it. But it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. That's a good position for the Wildcats to be in. Notre Dame, interesting with how it came on late. Michigan, interesting because of how they came on late. Kansas was Ian Premer's first offer. Iowa State was in there pretty early. I think the Cyclones are in there pretty well. I think the Jayhawks are in there pretty well. This is going to be a recruitment that I'll be honest with you, Ryan, it wouldn't shock me to see him pick any of the 5 at this point.
I was going to say, if you're looking at the, kind of the glass half full approach that I mentioned from a Kansas State fan's perspective, but also maybe the glass half empty approach from a Kansas State fan perspective, is obviously there's going to be, 4 other visits for teams to kind of tee off on some of the local schools, particularly Kansas State, knowing that they're going to have the last word. You've got, as you mentioned, 2 powerhouse programs historically with Michigan and Notre Dame involved. You've got Kansas and what they've done locally in this 2026 class. Ian kind of feeling maybe that tug that he could be the missing piece there. Iowa State, a program that, we've heard him talk about many a time, including tonight, how fond he is of that program and their style. The other thing that's going to be interesting, and again, kind of focusing on Kansas State here, is how the Wildcats kind of go against maybe two things that I feel like other teams or even in their own minds, they're going to have to work against. One of which is they've got the newest tight ends coach of any coach that's recruiting Ian right now. I mean, obviously he knows Matt Wells very well. He knows Brian LePack very well. Those guys are still on staff, will be very involved with him. But, Luke Wells is brand new. What, if at all, kind of weight does that carry? And the other thing, Kevin, and it kind of transitioning into another discussion about Ian here is, Ian said the right things about Lincoln Cure, right? I think they are friends. I don't think Ian Premer is bothered at all by competition. But at the same time, what's interesting, I think, about that dynamic is that they're pretty much the same style tight end. It's not, K-State where you had a Nick Lenners and you compare him with, Daniel Imatorbhebhe or, a Ben Sennett, and then you had Will Swanson. They are kind of like tight ends. I'm curious to see the pitch there and maybe, how they, I don't know if you want to say get around it, but, how they deliver that, because they are very similar stylistically. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, Ryan, is with him wanting to get this done before his senior year, you wonder with Kansas would want to show, hey, you're going to throw the ball to Deshaun Hanukkah. You're going to throw the ball to Kean Burnett and this tight end group down the field in a way that maybe you didn't do a year ago. And you're going to do it in a stadium that is, renovated in these facilities and all of these things. Ian's not going to see that before making his decision, if he makes the decision when he's planning on making it. And so I think that's also an interesting part, is Kansas can tell him until they're blue in the face, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to play all these tight ends. We want to throw it here. It's the new stadium's going to be great, all those things. He's maybe not going to be able to see that put into practice before he makes his decision. I do think you have a good point on he and Lincoln bringing some similar things and playing similar roles. I kind of think that's why, and obviously you will look at a lot of these things from a K-State perspective. I look at them a lot of times from a Kansas perspective. That's why I think he and Oots are kind of an interesting pair. Because I do think there are enough differences between the two that they can complement each other, and they're not necessarily, it's not going to be something where an egg in Ian's basket is taking one out of Jack Oots's basket or vice versa. And so I think that's interesting. Of course, Michigan too is going to hear Colston Loveland's name called pretty early NFL draft. Notre Dame got a great history using tight ends. Iowa State, I think, has done a great job here. And so it's going to be a pretty tight recruitment, I would think. And look, he maybe put it the best when he said all these 5 schools are here for a reason.
Yeah. The other thing too, and again, I wanted to touch on it just about Ian, that I feel like you and I get asked quite a bit, right? Or at least early on when people were kind of becoming a little bit more familiar with Ian, Lincoln Cure was on everybody's mind. This whole traction of Kansas tight ends, right? Is he close to Lincoln? Like, how similar are they? Again, you see the rankings, right? We haven't seen tight ends that high. And so to have 2 back-to-back like this, immediately everybody wants to compare, contrast, right? I think they are different though. Like when you watch them on tape, again, stylistically, they do a lot of the same things, but Lincoln was just so sudden, right? There was a different level of athleticism, probably from a testing standpoint, right? They're both phenomenal athletes, both phenomenal competitors, but Lincoln had maybe a little bit more air for like the wow at times. Whereas I think with Ian, you're, again, as I mentioned right off the top of the show, you're seeing more, and again, not to take anything away from Lincoln's motor, but you see Ian make more maybe out of little, right? At times, right? He's not going to just burn by guys, but he's going to be in the right spot. And then he's going to show the determination, the drive, the work ethic, all these other things, the body that continues to develop to then shed the tackles and do all those things. But maybe it's not as explosive or dynamic as a Lincoln Cure. Kevin, when I watch him, I don't think you have to go back too terribly far to find a guy that I think is more in line with when I watch Ian Premer, who I see. And again, I don't think it's necessarily a step down very far from a Lincoln Cure. Gavin Hoffman, excuse me,
Yeah.
that we just saw transfer from Iowa to Missouri, that, you know, what, 2 classes ago was the #1 player in the state of Kansas out of Blue Valley Northwest. And again, a guy that we were introduced to before his junior season as, hey, we talked this basketball player into coming out for football, and we think he might be pretty good. And yeah, you throw the basketball highlights on, the football highlights on. I see a lot of Gavin in Ian Premer, and I think that's a compliment. I think that's a huge positive, because I anticipate Gavin to do much bigger things at Missouri than maybe he would have in the scheme at Iowa.
And 2 guys that started off kind of as jumbo receivers and were growing into being, you know, more legitimate tight ends. And I like that comparison a lot. We talked before the show. I think Kenyon Tabor was a little more explosive coming out of Derby.
Yeah.
But sort of a similar, you know, in terms of fluidity of body, you know, kind of reminds me of Ian Premer. One of the best plays I've seen Ian make in person was he was actually fairly well defended. Quarterback threw the ball back shoulder, and he went and got it on the back shoulder and got a foot in. And you just don't see tight ends with that level of body control like he made there, where it was almost, you know, like he was able to detach at the waist, you know, to make that play. And to your point about going back to Lincoln is such an explosive kid, right? Like everything he does, it's like when he runs, he's pushing up off the ground to create that. I actually think, you know, Ian's probably a little bit more fluid of an athlete, but I think Lincoln is more explosive, probably.
Yes. I think that's a great way to put it.
Of course, as we mentioned earlier when talking to Ian, he wasn't the only Great Bend player to have a good Wednesday. When 24/7 Sports released their updated rankings for 2027, 2 Kansans and 1 Kansas City Metro product landed 4-star rankings. Number one in the state of Kansas in those rankings, was Premer's Great Bend teammate Cooper Omott, who we talked about on the show previously, even prior to today. And right behind him at number 2, and also landing a 4-star rating, was Hayes offensive lineman Gus Corsair. Ryan, those are 2 guys that we've both been able to see in person. So what did you think of those picks?
I thought it was interesting. I think, you know, for us, you know, we want to dive into 2027 a lot deeper before we start to come out with our own rankings, which we will. I think, though, that we would agree that maybe the floor right now is a little bit higher for Gus Corsair. Yep. But again, when it comes to the rankings, I don't think that's anything, you know, it's not like Cooper's floor is low. I think Cooper's ceiling might be higher. And I think you have to love the fact that there's still some uncertainty in a good way. I say that in a good, as a positive, of what position he could play, because he is that level of athlete. Kevin, the more I watch of Cooper Omott's film, the more I'm starting to like him even more, because when we saw him at 7-on-7, it was a lot of this stuff, right? It was a lot of, you know, being able to see him really put his foot in the ground and go. I thought his burst and his acceleration was even better in person than when you see on tape. Yeah. But I had him pegged, you know, strictly as a receiver, right? You know, and I'm looking at, you know, all the great things that he does with a physical body and his route tree. And then you start to see some clips here of him at safety and how he's closing and how he's physical. And I love this one. He's going to be here at the top corner, middle corner of your screen, comes up, makes that play there. There's also, you know, other clips that I saw of him in man-to-man coverage, and he's just like moving wide receivers out of the way so he can come up and run support and help. That level of physicality has me now intrigued about him on defense. And I was talking to you earlier today. He strikes me, I think, testing wise, and in this kind of duality of what he does on the football field, Callan Barta, who's at Kansas State now, but had committed to Nebraska a couple classes ago and then ended up flipping to the Wildcats. There's a lot of Callan Barta here, I think, and in a frame that maybe isn't quite as long, but is already, you know, a little bit thicker. You heard Ian talk about what he does in the weight room, on the track. I like the upside big time here. And Kevin, as I throw it back to you, another thing that really caught my attention about Cooper's tape is I think it's easy for somebody who's never seen him play to go in with the mindset of, well, this is a kid who's just using Ian Premer, to his benefit, right? They're scheming Ian to get Cooper open. Not so fast, my friends. There's a lot of Cooper creating here. And so I think that, again, speaks volumes about the player that Cooper is, and also speaks volume about, the season that Great Bend could have with these two on the field once more at the same time on offense.
We've said all along the easiest thing somebody can do to boost their ranking is to put up strong verified numbers, and the easiest way to do that, Ryan, is on the track. Cooper has a really interesting track and field profile. He throws the javelin, ran the 100 meters as a freshman, and he is an excellent jumper. So far this fall, he has a 22.6 long jump. I always kind of tell people 22 feet is kind of that benchmark where if you're long jumping 22 feet, you're pretty athletic. And his triple jump a year ago, 47 3.5. That's just an outrageous jump for a freshman. Moving to Gus Corsair, he actually has an interesting track profile as well as a thrower. Threw over 43 feet in the shot as a freshman. He's somebody, Ryan, that I think both of us, I'm not sure we could like more at this point in his career for where, he is, where he should be. He's a guy that I think combines really good core strength, and he's a lot better technically than you typically see for people his age.
Yeah, I hope that it doesn't come down to, Gus getting docked at some point from a recruiting standpoint over the next, year or two, simply because he's a center, right? Or because he's the interior lineman. We talked about it in our last episode when we highlighted Gus, at length about the fact that, everybody wants the Gray Zabel, right? The 6'7" guy that can go inside and outside. Gus really is an inside guy. He's going to play center. Maybe you can slide him out to a guard if you need to. But he's just so polished, man. And he's polished both, like you said, from a technical standpoint and from a strength standpoint. The floor is really high. I don't think there's going to be any doubts about what you're getting from Gus Corsair. And again, I think that speaks to why you and I like him so much. There's just not a lot of uncertainty with him in a very, very good way.
2027 St. Pius X offensive lineman Kyler Kuhn actually landed a spot in the top 200. We're talking another multi-sport athlete here, but in this case, Ryan, Kuhn is a dominant heavyweight wrestler who won the state this year.
Yeah, two-way lineman for St. Pius. That's a name that the folks in Kansas City will need to get familiar with because, again, we talked about the two kids in the WAC for 2027. And again, Kevin and I are going to dive into Kansas City a lot more in 2027. But right now, I mean, Kyler Kuhn is probably the cream of the crop on either side of the state line. The way that it looks right now, again, the pedigree that he has as a wrestler, you love hearing that when you hear linemen. And, you and I were hearing some buzz about Kyler Kuhn from coaches on both sides of the state line last year of like, have you seen the kid at Pius? And you and I were like, oh yeah, Hudson Bailey. And no, the other kid, and it was always Kyler Kuhn. Big upside for that young man.
One quick housekeeping note. We always feature two prospect profiles, one Kansan and one Missouri player who've caught our eye. We didn't want those players to get buried kind of with the way that this week's episode went, but fear not, they will be back again next week. All right, Ryan, we talked about it in the open. Kansas State landed Valley offensive lineman LaMarcus Barber. This is a guy that you advocated for as a top 10 player in the state when we ranked the 2026 class after this past high school season. So what do you think about this gift for the Wildcats?
I think it's a really good get and a really good fit. I called him on X the other night when he committed. I kind of coined him Lamaller Barber because, like, to me, when you watch his tape, that's what he is. I mean, it is pancake after pancake after pancake. I love this clip because he finds two guys to mow down, but it's Reggie Reese, doing it over and over and over. Let's find 74, get behind him. He gets out, he pulls. I think, the more people that I talk to, even if the film doesn't show it, they keep complimenting this kid as an athlete, that he's a much better athlete than even what shows up on tape. And so you combine that with the physical prowess that he plays with constantly. I heard from Coach Joel Appleby, friend of the show, earlier this week. This is a kid that the coaches kind of have to hold back at times in practice, right? Because he's just so intense, the aggression, right? And just wanting to, execute his assignment to the best of his abilities. It's like, save some for Friday, LaMarcus. But the other thing I think that's interesting about LaMarcus Barber, he's up to 299 pounds, is a legit 6'3", which, I think when he got there from Chapman, it was, is he 6'1"? Is he 6'2"? He's a legit 6'3" now. He's going to be playing at like 310, 320 with ease. And here's the other thing that Coach Appleby told me that was like, whoa, is he's still just 16 years old. He won't turn, I think, 17 until this summer. So you wonder, like, how much more growth is there, physically speaking. So, I love that about him. I love the fact, Kevin, that he played both ways. So, he's got that mentality. He's got the stamina, the conditioning to play both ways. And then for anybody out there that might have reservations, right, of like, well, why wasn't this kid top 10, right? Or, the Sunflower League wasn't as good last year. Any excuse you want to come up with for maybe, why LaMarcus Barber might not be it, right? I would urge you, right, to go back to a specific game. Look at the Lee Summit North game. I know that Mill Valley lost, but you're going to watch Barber go against Kamari Moore, who is committed to Oklahoma now, signed with Iowa State. You're going to see him go against Marcel Reed, who's, a gargantuan player to deal with at nose tackle, and so many other, like, the level of athlete, Kevin, that's on the Lee Summit North defense. And Reggie Reese ran for 200 plus yards that game. And again, a lot of it was because he was following the behind of 74. I thought that tape alone was a statement for me about, not only what LaMarcus Barber is now, but what LaMarcus Barber can be. A really good get for Kansas State. I like it a lot.
Well, one more quick question for you, Ryan. Is there anybody that Kansas State has had that he reminds you of?
Put me
on the spot a little bit.
No. I've actually thought about this, and I shudder to say it because it's like so high that but again, I like to go stylistically. I'm not saying this is what this kid's going to be. Don't set the expectation bar there. But again, when you talk about style, when you talk about, the power, maybe a like under the radar level athlete, the footwork that he shows, like how nimble he is for his size, the fact that he plays both ways in high school, Cooper Beebe.
I thought that was where you were going.
There is a lot of Cooper Beebe to LaMarcus Barber's game. And again, a kid that is probably going to come in with, again, a pretty similar floor. And still a lot of like juice still left to squeeze out. And we saw obviously K-State and Cooper get the most out of themselves as becoming one of the most decorated offensive linemen in Kansas State history. That's high praise for LaMarcus. But again, I just think if you put on both their tapes side by side, there's a lot of Cooper Beebe there.
That's a good place to end. Thanks again to all those of you who tuned in for our first live episode of the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. And thanks to those of you who are watching after the fact. I'm biased, but I think we've continued to build something pretty special here where we can shine a little bit of a spotlight on local players and highlight the hard work that they're putting in. So help us continue to make that light a little bit brighter. Leave us a comment, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. For Ryan Wallace, Nick Springer behind the scenes, I'm Kevin Flaherty. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.